Hi, this is Mark Dudley, and this is my um, case study presentation for EDL 853, Module 8. The name of this case study is Get This Child Out of My Room. Just a brief summary of this case study. This case study is about a student named Carl, who is a third grader with a behavior disorder. He is currently having difficulties in class due to his parents' divorce, or that's what has lately stemmed the behavior. Miss Taylor is the teacher that feels threatened in her class. Carl has been throwing things at her. She goes to Miss Susan Green, who is Carl's case manager, and is pleading to him to get Carl out of her class. In the past, the former case manager, Miss Lewis, would have taken Carl out of class. Miss Green wants to kind of get to the bottom of it, than just taking Carl out of the educational space. So we're going to look at the issues and challenges that come along with this case. All right, so first thing is identifying what the problem is and then looking at it and seeing how we can move from there. The problem is Carl is being aggressive in class. A lot of his anger and his behavior is aimed towards his teacher. For example, throwing pins at her. So this is what we know. Carl's a third grader. He has aggressive behavior. His parents are recently divorced, and his behavior has worsened since the divorce. Susan Green is a brand new special education teacher that has Carl on her caseload. And then Carl's teacher is Miss Nancy Taylor. And the reason for this case study is Miss Taylor wants Carl removed from her class because of this behavior. Here's kind of things what we need to know. Is Carl acting out in other classes? I realize it's third grade, so he may only have one teacher and maybe some fine arts teachers, such as music, art, PE, things like that. So maybe is he acting out in those other classes as well? If so, how have those other teachers dealt with him? Is he doing these behaviors there? Is there anything that necessarily triggers his outburst? Is Miss Taylor being short with him, instead of trying to help him, does she kind of provoke his outburst? Is she following his IEP? Is she following his behavior plan? So those are some of the things that we need to know. All right, so as a proposed plan of action, this is what I propose. If I was the administrator, obviously I would meet with all stakeholders. I would meet with the special education teacher. I would meet with the gen ed teacher and make sure that whatever IEP or behavior plan is in place is being followed. Sometimes teachers get frustrated with students and they just want to move on from them. They don't take the time to actually follow the steps that were taken. Obviously, I would review the situation. I would call in the parents, sit down with the teacher, the parents, and the special ed case manager, and make sure that the IEP was current, that all the needs were being met. If not, since everyone is there, we would make those changes to the IEP at that time, since all of those stakeholders have to be present in that meeting anyway. And again, that's part of developing a plan that can keep Carl in the classroom and not have him sent out of class just because he's a disturbance. And then part of that meeting too is I would address how to handle this within the discipline code. I think it's important. One thing that's not mentioned is that Ms. Taylor never went to the principal to address these behaviors. I think it's important that we follow the behavior plan, follow the IEP, and that includes how to discipline the student in the right way. I think that's one of the things that needs to be addressed in this problem. And then I would follow up with weekly meetings with the counselor, work with Carl, help him maybe talk about some of the issues that he's dealing with his parents' divorce, help him work through that with someone that's trained whether it's a school counselor or our school psychologist. So those are the things I would try to do immediately to try to get this problem resolved. All right, and again, all of this is done to try to promote the success of our students. It's important that Carl stay in the classroom. If he can stay in the classroom, they can follow the plan, then that's what we want. But if not, again, we got to go back to the disciplinary measures. We need to make sure that he's being disciplined in the proper channels. His behavior plan is being followed. Everything's being done by the teacher, by Ms. Taylor, to provide him a successful learning environment. Again, we got to, it's a state law that we follow these IEPs, these behavior plans, so it's necessary that we follow that. And again, we need to give Carl an outlet for his behavior. So whether that's a meeting once a week with a counselor or school psychologist, we need to make sure that he has an outlet and he's not just dealing with this on his own. Okay, so it's very important that we provide, one, the structure in place, the IEP, the behavior plan, but we give him an outlet and allow him to talk to a counselor or school psychologist. As far as debriefing the problem, some of the first things I think of when I think of this is Miss Taylor's unwilling to work with Miss Green. I felt like Miss Green kind of went above and beyond to try to kind of get to the root of the problem, whereas Miss Taylor just wanted to get him out of the classroom. And I understand that it probably is very frustrating to have a student act that way. Obviously, for her safety and the safety of the class, and as far as being a disruption, but she needs to be more open to helping the situation and not just trying to dump it off on someone else. And obviously, on the same token, I feel for Miss Taylor in the classroom. I imagine third grade can be a very tricky age where students can be disrupted very quickly. And I imagine having a student throwing things at my head, saying negative things towards me, being aggressive can cause problems not only for the teacher but for the students. And you don't want that student hurting the learning opportunities of others. So I understand, I kind of feel for what she's dealing with, and maybe she had called these parents before and seen the same type of behavior that the parents showed in the meeting where they weren't willing to help. And Carl's kind of on his own. She's kind of at her wits' end. So I do kind of feel for Miss Taylor a little bit at this as well. One of the things that I really value in this case study is Miss Green's willingness to get to the bottom. She really wanted to have meetings. She met with her superintendent. She talked with her superintendent. She met with Miss Taylor. She called the parents. She set up a new meeting for an IEP. Like, she's not just trying to take this student out of the classroom and say, okay, everything's fine. She's trying to get to the bottom and provide opportunities for Carl to get better and stay in the classroom. So I really value the work that she's trying to do. And again, it's probably undervalued because it's different than what Miss Lewis was doing in the past. And I think one of the unresolved issues that we see here that comes up in the meeting is what are we providing for Carl to help resolve these feelings? Obviously, his parents are divorced. They could get back together. They may not. It doesn't look like it at this time. So what are we providing to him to help him get through this? Because obviously he's just a third grader. He's got a lot of school left. What can we do to provide him some opportunities to get through this, whether it's counseling, talking to a school psychologist? What can we do to help him get through this time and kind of get back on track? As far as any type of reflection, I think it's important that obviously that regular ed teachers are aware of the regulations that we have to follow the IEP or the behavior plan. A lot of times I think any type of accommodations, extra work that a teacher has to do, sometimes that gets swept under the rug. It's so important that we communicate this with our teachers. And it's also important as a building leader to make sure that there's good communication between all parties. A special education teacher doesn't just need to communicate the accommodation and be done with checklist. I've checked off my list. They've signed the paper. They've got it. No, special education teacher needs to work with these teachers on a regular basis to help improve the learning opportunities for these students. It doesn't need to be a checklist. It doesn't need to be something we communicate once at the beginning of each year or each semester. It needs to be something that there needs to be continual communication. And then, for example, when a new behavior starts up, we need to evaluate the IEP. We need to come together, all the stakeholders, parents, teachers, administration, and make sure that these students are getting all the attention and all their needs met. Again, the goal here will be to get Carl to help overcome this personal issue so he can get back in the classroom and be an asset and not a liability in these situations. And again, all of the things that we're doing here are for the well-being of all our students. Obviously, it's not good if Carl is throwing pencils in class. It's not good if he's disrupting class. It's not good if he's showing aggressive behavior. So, again, getting Carl in a situation where his well-being is at our forefront. Obviously, it would help get Miss Taylor's class back to normal. Okay, and again, we have to track this stuff. We have to, we probably need to set up weekly meetings. We need to track his performance. Miss Taylor would be smart if she wrote down how his accommodations were being met, made notes so that, that not only is she clearing herself, but she's showing that she is trying to help Carl and not just try to get him taken out of her classroom. So those are very important. And again, everything that we're doing, we're trying to increase or enhance the instructional capacity. And obviously with Carl being out of or being disruptive in class, it disrupts instruction, okay, and it causes other students to lose educational opportunities. And so again, it goes back to our legal requirement. Is the IEP being followed? Is our behavior plan being followed? And if not, we need to make sure that's happening. And we need to go through the proper channels. Follow the IEP, but we got to get the administration involved at some point. If a student is being disruptive to the point where they can't be helped, then we need to get that student out of the classroom, and we need to get them more help. And maybe there's help at the district level. Maybe there's a school that can better provide for Carl if he can't overcome this problem in the short term. So it's very, very important that the school, especially Ms. Green, Ms. Taylor, and the administration take the steps to make sure that they can get instruction back to normal as quick as possible in the classroom.